Picture this. It's a Friday night. Your phone is buzzing with invitations. A dinner here, a party there, someone's birthday at a bar that's definitely going to be too loud. And instead of feeling excited, you feel relieved when you finally have a reason to say no. You pour yourself something warm, sit in the quiet of your own space, and something inside you just exhales. Like you've been holding your breath all week, and only now, finally, can you breathe again. Now, the world looks at that moment and calls it sad. It calls it lonely. It calls it something to fix. But what if it isn't any of those things? What if that exhale is actually one of the most psychologically sophisticated things a human being can do? Today, we're diving deep into the minds of people who genuinely prefer being alone. Not because they're broken, not because they've given up on people, but because something in how their brain is wired makes solitude feel less like an absence and more like a homecoming. And by the end of this, whether you're someone who craves that quiet or someone who genuinely cannot understand it, you're going to see this very differently. Let's start with the thing everyone gets wrong. When most people hear prefers to be alone, their brain immediately goes to one of two stories. Either this person is painfully shy, awkward, maybe a little sad, or they're a mysterious genius who doesn't need anyone, living in a lighthouse somewhere, writing their masterpiece. Neither of those is really the truth. The psychological reality is far more interesting and far more human. Researchers who study personality and social behavior have drawn a really important distinction that most of us never learned: the difference between loneliness and aloneness. Loneliness is a feeling of disconnection, a hunger for contact that isn't being met. It's painful, it's involuntary. Aloneness, on the other hand, is chosen. It's voluntary solitude. And for certain people, chosen solitude isn't a wound, it's a resource. Think of it like this. Imagine your mental and emotional energy is a phone battery. For most people, social interaction drains the battery a little, and quiet time charges it back up. That's basically the introvert experience in a nutshell. But for people who strongly prefer solitude, that battery drains faster in social settings and charges more powerfully when alone. It's not that they dislike people, it's that the math just works differently for them. Neuroscience actually backs this up in a fascinating way. Studies using brain imaging have shown that introverts and solitude-seekers tend to have more activity in the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for deep thinking, planning, and internal processing. Their brains are, quite literally, doing more work on the inside. They're not disengaged from the world, they're processing it at a different depth. Meanwhile, research from the University of Helsinki found that people who score high on solitude preference tend to be more sensitive to dopamine, meaning the stimulation that feels energizing to a social butterfly can feel genuinely overwhelming to them. Their nervous systems aren't broken, they're just more finely tuned. And here's where it gets really interesting. People who are comfortable being alone have often developed something that psychologists call intrapersonal intelligence, a deep, rich relationship with their own inner world. Howard Gardner, the psychologist behind the theory of multiple intelligences, described this as the ability to understand oneself, one's emotions, motivations, fears and desires, with unusual clarity. While the rest of the world is looking outward for stimulation and validation, these people have an entire universe running on the inside. Their thoughts are company. Their imagination is entertainment. Their inner monologue isn't something they want to escape from. It's where they live. Now, I want to talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough, which is how much courage it actually takes to be someone like this in the world we live in. Because we live in a culture that is, to put it mildly, obsessed with togetherness. Every self-help book, every workplace, every social media platform is essentially shouting the same thing: connect more, share more, be more visible, be more available. Solitude has been quietly, systematically pathologized. If you're alone too much, people worry about you. They ask if you're okay. They treat your quiet Friday night like a symptom. But here's a perspective shift worth sitting with. Some of the most creative, insightful, and psychologically resilient people in history were known for their fierce need for solitude. Einstein famously said that he was a loner as a youth, and that his separation actually helped him develop his ability to think independently. Nikola Tesla had almost no social life. Frida Kahlo spent enormous stretches of time alone with her paintings and her thoughts. And none of that was in spite of their inner depth. It was because of it. Solitude wasn't their deficiency, it was their fuel. Let me paint you a picture of what's actually happening psychologically when someone who prefers solitude spends time alone. It's not emptiness, it's consolidation. The mind, freed from the cognitive load of navigating other people, their emotions, their expectations, their conversational needs, can finally do what it was always trying to do. It can make connections between ideas. It can process unresolved feelings. It can daydream, which, by the way, neuroscience now recognizes as a deeply productive mental state. The default mode network, a set of brain regions that activates when we're not focused on the outside world, is responsible for creativity, self-reflection, empathy, and future planning. And it thrives in solitude. Your brain is literally upgrading itself when you're sitting quietly, doing what the world assumes is nothing. There's also something to be said about self-knowledge. People who spend a lot of time in their own company tend to know themselves very well. They know what they actually think, not just what they've been told to think. They know what genuinely makes them happy, not just what they're supposed to want. There's a kind of psychological clarity that comes from all that internal time. And paradoxically, research has found that people who are comfortable with solitude are often better in their relationships when they do choose to engage. They're more intentional, more present, less likely to lose themselves in someone else because they already know who they are. Now, I don't want to romanticize this entirely because the truth is nuanced. There are times when preferring solitude crosses a line, when it becomes avoidance, when it's driven by anxiety rather than genuine preference, when isolation starts to chip away at a person's well-being rather than restore it. A preference for solitude that is chosen and peaceful is very different from a withdrawal that is fearful and compulsive. And if you're watching this, and something in that distinction feels uncomfortably familiar, that's worth paying attention to. Solitude that genuinely nourishes you should feel like freedom. If it feels more like hiding, that's a different conversation. But for the vast majority of people who simply, genuinely, deeply prefer their own company, the message the world sends them, that they're somehow missing out, that they need to be fixed, that their wiring is a flaw, that message is simply wrong. And it costs people a lot. It costs them self-acceptance. It costs them the ability to honor their own needs. It costs them years of pretending to be someone they're not because they were made to feel that who they actually are wasn't quite enough. So here's where I want to leave you. If you're someone who prefers solitude, I want you to consider the possibility that your quiet isn't a gap in your personality. It's a feature. Your capacity to be alone, really alone, comfortably alone, is one of the rarest and most underrated forms of emotional maturity there is. The world will always have opinions about how you should spend your Friday nights. But your nervous system, your creativity, your inner life, those are yours. And they're telling you something worth listening to. If you're someone who doesn't prefer solitude, but you're trying to understand someone who does, a partner, a friend, a child, I hope this gave you a window into what that world actually feels like from the inside. It's not rejection, it's not indifference, it's just a different kind of fullness. And if you're somewhere in the middle, still figuring out the balance between connection and solitude that actually works for you, welcome to the most human place to be. Drop a comment below if any of this resonated with you. I'm especially curious. When you're alone, does it feel like rest, or does it feel like restlessness? That answer says a lot. And if you want to keep exploring the hidden architecture of how your mind works, there's a lot more where this came from. See you in the next one.